Hallelujah. Well, the Most High be praised. This time we want to get prepared for our class session. Hallelujah. Bless the mighty one of Israel. Praise the mighty one of Israel. I want to say shalom to all of you. For you that are joining us by live stream, we want to say shalom to you. Right now we're getting ready to prepare for our teaching today. For those who might be joining us for the first time, this is Biblical World History. This is the class that we are in, and we're going to be looking at lesson number 6. Lesson number 6. I do want to remind those who are joining us for the first time that our sources that we are using are the Bible, the book of Yahshua, the book of Enoch. Also, we're using a source. Now, we're not going to use all of those particular sources in this class today, but I just wanted to inform you that site at www. Also, you can go outside of our website and obtain the book of Yahshua as well through the PDF format for the book, or you can online PDF books you can download from our ministry library. That way, for those who are attending, will have the opportunity to these resources. All right, because that's very important. We want to make sure you have the resources and know how to access Yahshua in particular in this lesson that we're going to be covering. So we're going to be looking at, that's what we're going to be covering today: Jacob, Esau, and the 12 tribes. So with that being said, and then we'll get into, Father, we do bless you and thank you, the Melchizedek, during that time. We talked about how Shem, we talked about how the Most High confirmed Isaac received a visitation from the Most High, and Isaac had the covenant confirmed with him. We talked about how Isaac has 2 sons, Jacob and Esau, and how that Esau, being the firstborn, went in a direction contrary in promise. So the Most High shows up and visits Jacob and confirms covenant with Jacob. And that brings us to we're going to continue to have discussion about Jacob and also about Esau. I want to refer to the prophecy that was made with reference to Jacob and Esau when they were being born. So let's go to Bereshit, or Genesis chapter 26. We go to 26th chapter. Actually, chapter 25, I'm sorry. Chapter 25 is where I want to go. chapter 25, and we're going to look at verses 19 through 26. And it says, these are the descendants of Isaac, Abraham's son. Abraham was the father of Isaac, and Isaac was 40 years old when he married Rebekah, daughter of Bethuel, the Aramean of Padan Aram, sister of Laban the Aramean. Isaac or Yitzhak prayed to Yahuwah for his wife because she was barren. And Yahuwah granted his prayer, and his wife Rebekah conceived. The children struggled together within her, and she said, if it is to be this way, why do I live? So she went to inquire of Yahuwah, and Yahuwah said to her, 2 nations are in your womb, and 2 peoples born of you shall be divided. The one shall be stronger than the other. The elder shall serve the younger. Now, this prophecy that we see here, I was supposed to go off of verse 26. Let me finish reading. I'm sorry. Verse 24. And when her time to give birth was at hand, there were twins in her womb. The first came out red, all his body like a hairy mantle. So they named him Esau. Afterward, his brother came out, with his hand gripping Esau's heel. So he was named Jacob or Yaakov. Isaac was 60 years old when he bore them. Now, I wanted to say some things about Jacob and Esau. At the time of their birth, that while they were in the womb, they were struggling. They were fighting. They were already, or Rivka, 2 nations and 2 peoples would be divided. So what we see is nations that are going to be opposition to each other throughout history is the prophecy. This is the point that's made. It says, one shall be stronger than the other, and the elder shall serve the younger. So we do not see in this prophecy that there would be a union of the 2 nations. We see division. We see animosity at the beginning. When they are trying to get out of the womb, we have Yaakov, that's Jacob, trying to pull Esau back in so he can get out first. So we find that there is a struggle for position. This is what we see in these 2 nations, a struggle for position, a struggle for power. Now, according to the prophecy, the younger would be the one favored. So this prophecy sets the stage for what would occur throughout the future generations of the children of Esau and the children of Yaakov. This prophecy right here. This is very important for us to understand, because as we come to terms with this prophecy, and when we move through history, we will be able to understand the outcomes of the lives of the descendants of Jacob and the descendants of Esau. There will be continual animosity. division, there will be the fight for position, power, and prominence between these two peoples. That's what we see in this prophecy. And we want to make it clear up front so that as we move forward, we'll see these things manifesting. All right? Esau becomes a man of the field, a hunter, while Jacob is called a quiet man who lives in his tents. They have two different personalities. And you have the one that takes, you have the other who lives in peace, strives to have harmony. He's not a taker. Mm-hmm. Generally, the spirit of a hunter is one who takes, one who is aggressive. And that's the spirit that's in Esau. Now, Esau, as we begin to look at him and make a comparison to another individual who was very powerful at that time and who had already demonstrated that he was a taker, one who strived for power, and that's Nimrod. Mm-hmm. In the book of Genesis, we don't find any information about Nimrod after the Tower of Babel. We don't see anything. And it appears as though Nimrod just somewhat fades into oblivion from the history. But the reality is that so long as important people and people of power are still alive, they no doubt are a part of the history in the world, overlap with those of the covenant people or those related to the covenant people. And we see this in the book of Yahshua. The book of Yahshua records a situation where Esau has an encounter with Nimrod. And this encounter that Esau has with Nimrod is where Nimrod loses his life. Esau kills Nimrod. Mm-hmm. And we're going to look at this. This particular piece of history is important in a number of ways, because what it does, it helps to answer some questions about why Esau was in such a exhausted state of being when he came to his brother Jacob, and Jacob had Esau to sell him his birthright. We're going to see some things in Yahshua that are going to fit. Yahshua chapter 27, verses 1 through 12. I want you to listen to this. And Esau at that time, after the death of Abraham, frequently went in the field to hunt. And Nimrod, Genesis, when it talks about Nimrod, notice the thing it says about Nimrod. It says he was a mighty hunter, right? Mm-hmm. This is what's noted about him before he became king of the world. All right. So we see these similarities between him and Esau. Okay. Esau all the days, for a jealousy was formed in the heart of Nimrod against Esau. And on a certain day, Esau went in the field to he found Nimrod walking in the wilderness with his 2 men. And all his mighty men and his people were with him in the wilderness, but they were removed at a distance from him. And they went from him in different directions. And Esau concealed himself for Nimrod, and he lurked for him in the wilderness. And Nimrod and his men that were with him did not know. Nimrod and his men frequently walked about in the field at the day, and to know where his men were hunting in the field. And Nimrod and his men, and 2 of his men that were with him, came to the place where they were. When Esau started suddenly from his lurking place and drew and ran to Nimrod and cut off his head. And Esau fought a desperate fight with the 2 men that were with Nimrod. And when they called out to him, Esau turned to them and smote them to death with his sword. And all the mighty men of Nimrod, who had left him to go to the wilderness, heard the cry at a distance. And they knew the voices of those 2 men, saw the mighty men of Nimrod, and thereby escaped. I want you to listen to this part. And Esau took the valuable garments of Nimrod, which Nimrod's father had bequeathed to Nimrod, and with which Nimrod prevailed over the whole land. And he ran and them in his house. And Esau took those garments and ran into the city on account of Nimrod's men. And he came into his father's house, wearied and exhausted from it. He was ready to die through grief when he approached his brother Jacob and sat before him. Verse 12. And he said unto his brother Jacob, Behold, I shall die this day. Wherefore then do I want the birthright? And Jacob acted wisely with Esau in this matter, and Esau sold his birthright to Jacob, for it was so brought about by the Lord. Now, before I move forward in saying something about the birthright that had been sold to Jacob, I want to talk about Esau taking these garments from Nimrod. I had mentioned in the previous lesson that when Nimrod had received the garments, and these garments were those who were the Melchizedek kings, such as stole the garments to his son Nimrod. We had said that these garments, it had a authority from Elohim contained in them. Whoever wore the garments were favored with special power. And by this power the garments gave to the wearer, they were able to be successful. As we have read over in the 10th verse of Yahshua chapter 27, notice in the latter part of the 10th verse, it says, with respect to these garments, it says, and with which Nimrod prevailed over the whole land. Catch that? By the fact that Nimrod had Adam's garments that had been passed down from generation to generation, Nimrod was able to be successful as a ruler in the earth because of those garments. Now, Genesis doesn't mention anything about the power of Adam's garments. The only thing better is that the Most High filled animals and made these garments of animal skin and had made clothes for himself of the fig leaves. But the Most High saw that the clothing that he made for himself was not fitting for him. So Elohim made garments for Adam. And of course, with Elohim making those garments for Adam, it provided Adam with the authority of Elohim to be able to be seen as a governor in the earth or over the earth at that time, where the animals respected him. Okay? This is something that's very important. We don't find this in Genesis, but when you read the book of Yahshua, it fills in the gaps. So the sons of men during this time were fully aware of Adam's garments. They were fully aware of the power that was in those garments. That's the reason why Ham stole them from his father. Because you had men who want to have power, as men have always desired. They want to have power. They want to rule the world. That's just been a issue with man, to have power and to rule. So the only way you can do that is you got to somehow set yourself up in a position to be able to do that. They knew that those garments of Adam held that kind of power. When Nimrod obtained those garments, he was able to rule the world from Babel. That's what gave him that ability. That's interesting, because what we see in that and the authority and the power of Elohim attached to it, and you can corrupt its use. And this is what was going on. Mm-hmm. Okay? We find this here in this particular instance. And in this situation, Esau was being trained by Nimrod. Nimrod was jealous of this younger man. I mean, think about this. Nimrod was 15 years old when Esau killed him. Okay?
Wow.
Esau, yeah. Nimrod was 215 years old when Esau killed him. Nimrod had been around for a good long while. And he had power through those garments. But he saw a young man coming up, reminded him of himself, no doubt. And it said a jealousy was formed in him. This is what Yahshua tells us in this piece of history. And it appears from the text that Nimrod was trying to set up Esau to be ambushed. That's what it appears. Because he said he had been watching him. And they both would come out into the field and they would hunt. And so Esau caught wind of it. He caught wind of it. Oh, they're trying to track me. They're trying to ambush me. So Esau hid himself, got himself in a position where he could be able to have the greater advantage over Nimrod. And he did, and he killed Nimrod. But he had to fight for his life. And so after fighting, Esau takes the garments and flees away. And this is where he gets to Jacob. Now seeing all this from Yahshua, it now makes sense as to why Esau was in such a state as he was in. Yes. Let's go to the book of Genesis, chapter 25. And we want to go to verses 29 through 34. I'm sorry, I believe it's chapter, let's see. Am I the right one? Is it 29? Yeah, 29 through 34. Yes. Okay. Yes. There it is. Chapter 25 of Genesis, verse 29 through 34. Because in Genesis, we have information that tells us of Esau coming from the field and he's famished. Mm-hmm. And listen to what this says in verse 29. It says, once when Jacob was cooking a stew, Esau came in from the field and he was famished. Esau said to Jacob, let me eat some of that red stuff, for I am famished. Therefore he was called Edom. Jacob said, first sell me your birthright. Esau said, I'm about to die. Of what use is the birthright to me? Jacob said, swear to me first. So he swore to him and sold his birthright to Jacob. Then Jacob gave Esau bread and lentil stew, and he ate and drank and rose and went his way. Thus Esau despised his birthright. Now, as we looked at Yahshua has similar information here, but it doesn't tell us exactly what Jacob said. All we see in Yahshua is that it says Jacob acted wisely with Esau in this matter, and Esau sold his birthright to Jacob. So it doesn't tell us what Genesis tells us, but it does tell us that when Esau had come to Jacob, that Esau said to him, why then do I care about those feelings? Because he had just killed Nimrod, he had just killed two other men, and he's thinking, okay, Nimrod's men are going to be after me. So the birthright don't mean anything to me. Yeah, go ahead, take it. Just give me some of that porridge. Just say, I'm hungry, I'm famished, I'm worn out. We see that Esau was just responding to his disposition at that time. But what we find out here is that Esau did not value the birthright. He did not value that which was his according to him being the firstborn. He didn't value it. And when he despised the birthright, of course, that brought him into displeasure with the Most High. Now, I would think that the reason why Esau had come to that place of diminishing the value of the birthright is because of what he had just obtained from Nimrod. I want you to see the picture. Because see, Esau is the firstborn, right? Mm-hmm. Being the firstborn, you have the birthright. You have also the blessing. Now, Jacob didn't ask him if he could have the blessing that his father put on him. He said, look, I want your birthright. Okay. But let's read verse 13 and 14 of Yahshua. Yahshua chapter 27, verse 13 and 14. And we're going to see what were the things that were a part of the birthright. Okay. Listen to this. And Esau's portion in the cave of the field of Machpelah, which Abraham had bought from the children of Heth for possession of a burial ground. Esau also sold to Jacob. And Jacob bought all this from his brother for value given. Okay, verse 14. And Jacob wrote the whole of this in a book, and he testified the same with witnesses, and he sealed it. And the book remained in the hands of Jacob. So in order for Jacob to secure the birthright, the transaction, he made sure that he wrote it down, put it in the book. And we know in the book of Genesis, in verse 33, Jacob said to Esau, swear to me first, right? About the exchange. Now, Genesis does not give us the detailed information as Yahshua does, but it does imply that there was some type of transaction and agreement that they made. We see that. But we also see that Esau had come from killing Nimrod, which was the reason why he said, I'm about to die. All right? Does that make sense to everybody? Now, see, when you don't have the source book of Yahshua providing this information, you don't really understand why Esau is coming to his brother in Genesis and saying, give me some of that red stuff. I'm hungry. I'm famished. It makes sense. See, it makes much more sense. We understand, okay, he's fearing for us. And the other thing that I find that's very important is that he had just that in his mind, it had the potential rulers. To remember that. In history, it affected thing that has brought us up onto this place in our world today. Now, I don't have time ruling kingdoms in the earth. I don't have the time to get into all of that. But as we're looking at this, and as we're understanding that by having possession of something that has the power of Elohim on it, as a result of that, it is being inappropriately used. See, you can benefit from the power of Elohim and use it in the wrong way to achieve your goals and your purposes. Nimrod did it. All right? And we see the same thing happening. So, all right? I'm just going to leave it right there. And the nations that are connected to Edomites, right? So after this situation where Jacob receives the birthright of Esau because Esau sells it to Jacob, Jacob then receives the blessing of his father Isaac. That's the next major event. We find that noted in chapter 27, verses 27 through 29. In that section of scripture, Jacob receives the blessing from Isaac, Also in that same chapter, in the 39th verse and 40th verse of Genesis chapter 27, we find Isaac's prophecy upon Esau. All right? And this right here is very, very important as well. And I like to read this prophecy in Genesis chapter 27, verses 39 and 40. All right. Does someone have a King James version? Can you bring that to me? I want to read from the King James version. I have preference to the way in which these verses are translated. Just bring it to me. I have preference to the way in which these verses are translated, even though I don't always use the King James version when I am reading in the Hebrew scriptures. This particular piece I have preference to. I believe that it translates it in the most accurate way. So we're at Genesis, Bereshit, chapter 27, verse 39. All right, I want you to listen to this. And I'm reading verses 39 and 40. His father answered and said, behold, your dwelling shall be the fatness of the earth, and by your shall you live, and shall serve your brother. And it shall come to pass, when you shall have the dominion, his yoke from off your neck. Did y'all hear that? So this prophecy, you're going to enjoy this of the earth. This is what he tells him. Yes. But you're going to get it by taking it, because you're going to live by the sword. You hear that prophecy? Mm. So Esau and his descendants will be people that will take by the sword. And notice it says, you're going to take the dominion, which means that he is going to endure and he's going to break the yoke of Jacob off of his neck. So what that means is that in this prophecy, Esau is going to rise to a position of prominence, and he is no longer going to serve his brother. That's what this is saying. Okay? I'll read it again. And the dew of heaven from above, and by your sword you shall live, and shall serve your brother. And it shall come to pass, when you shall have the dominion, so what we see here regarding Esau and his descendants, that there will be a period of time in which the Esau and will break that yoke. Divert for a moment and just interject. See, which was immediately south, they took over Edom. They Edom to Judah, and they forced the Edomites to be converted to Jews, to become Jews. All right? Servitude of Esau to Jacob. Now, of course, prior to that time, there had always been infightings, and there had always been Esau wanting to take possession of Jacob. When you read through Yahshua and you that Esau has been about the business of trying to undercut the children of Israel. In the scriptures, we know that Esau was the one responsible for not allowing Judah to be able to escape. They blocked the ways to ensure that Babylon will be able to take them captives. They also took Judah, sold them to Tyre, and Tyre sold them to the Greeks. We read that in the prophet, the house of Israel. The prophecy of yokes being able to strategically be in positions of key religious positions. Also, we see the Roman Empire coming to prominence, and Rome is a mixture of the descendants of Esau and the descendants of Yavan. So what I'm saying is that you have Edom coming to power and dominion in the earth and breaking the yoke of Israel off of its neck. Now, let's get back to this particular piece of history. And we're going to go over that when we get to the period of the first century, where we will reiterate what I just mentioned. But I couldn't help at the time of the blessing. It lets us, that makes sense to everybody? Mm-hmm. All right, so now we want to look at the fact that 18 through 22, we have Yahuwah making the covenant with Jacob. Also, we want to note that Esau has sons, and they live in the hill country of Seir. There's a person here that's significant in the line of Esau. He is the grandson of Esau. His name is Zepho. He is the son of Eliphaz. Because Esau's first son is Eliphaz, and then Eliphaz, his son Zepho, goes into the land of Kittim, which is the name for that region of Rome and Italy. He goes into Italy and becomes the king there. You can read about that in Yahshua chapter 61. We also find that Jacob has 12 sons. That information is noted in Genesis chapters 29 through 35. Must note, has to do with Joseph being sold into slavery by his brothers. They were jealous of him because of his visions. And we find that information in Genesis chapter 37. With respect to Joseph, Joseph is used by the Almighty while he is in Egypt or Mitzrayim. And that's noted in Genesis chapter 39 through chapters 47. You read those chapters and it goes into detail of what Joseph dealt with, of him being justly going to prison, coming out of prison, interpreting the dreams of Pharaoh, and then becoming the second in command in Egypt. He was able to help give wisdom to Pharaoh so that Egypt would be the place of prosperity and a place where the surrounding nations would be fed during the time of famine. So Joseph was used by Elohim. Sons going into Egypt to live in the regarded as the best part of Egypt, arrived in Egypt, in the land of Egypt, Joseph, things began to change. And that would bring us into the book of Shemot or Exodus, where in chapter 1, it tells us that there was a king that arose that did not know Joseph. And upon seeing members of the Israelites of being intimidated, desired to enslave of Israel being enslaved in Egypt. And we're going to stop right there. Are there any questions? All right. Light on some things that you did not know. I'm sure that there were some questions, and found Yahshua to be an excellent in our scriptures. And so I'm so for this time and being able to share this information as we are learning, then that as we see the pieces to the puzzle that you have placed, to know how to position ourselves as your servants in the earth and to make decisions that will serve the best interests of your people. Thank you, Abba. Bless your people. Bless each student. May they learn, may they glean, may they grow in their faith, and may they take this historical information and be able to appropriate it with the scriptures, to understand the scriptures in a greater light. We have been edified and illuminated, greater light, a greater understanding where it's just being opened up. Then we encourage you to share a donation unto the Most High. It assists us in being able to produce materials and to send them to our brothers and sisters by clicking on the donate button, or you can share by Cash App. Our Cash App code is $NCMMI. Most of all, in the highest degree of integrity as we bring truth to the forefront. Well, the Most High bless. Shalom.